Welcome to First Strike here on VSiN. I'm your host, Dave Ross. For the next hour, going to break down this week's card. Pretty interesting main event. Cory Sandhagen against Rob Font. This fight's been switched a couple times. Right now, as we stand, Cory Sandhagen over a $3 betting favorite. Our experts, Lou Finocchiaro, Jordan Sherwood, Nick Kalikas, and Reed Kuhn, going to help us break down all the numbers from this card. But very quickly, let's look back at UFC 291. And woo! The BMF title, it now resides with one Justin Gaethje, whether or not we really care about said belt, but he is the owner of it after getting a second-round stoppage of the Diamond Dustin Poirier in spectacular fashion. I don't know what it is about Salt Lake City and head kicks. We saw Leon Edwards get that done against Kamaru Usman as he won the belt there, and now a head kick here from Justin Gaethje. The highlight gets it done against Dustin the Diamond Poirier. And then Alex Pereira co-main event against Jan Blachowicz. Interesting fight, a split decision fight, very close fight that goes Pereira's way. We'll figure out what he looks like at light heavyweight, but he does get a win in the co-main event in his first fight, up at 205. Let's bring in the aforementioned Lou Finicaro. You can follow him as I do on Twitter at Gamblue, the host of the About Business podcast. Lou, let's get to this week's card. Now, we look at Cory Sandhagen, and I don't want to say he's getting into that gatekeeper role here, but he's close. A guy that's always knocking on the door, maybe of winning a title, but hasn't been able to do it yet here. This is a catchweight bout that he's going to have against Rob Font, who was an injury replacement here. What do you make of Cory as over a $3 betting favorite against 50K, or at least Rob Font here, one of those guys that always is in the hunt for a 50K bonus?
Well, Dave, first of all, thanks so much for having me on. It's always a pleasure to join you and such a great crew to present some of these ideas to our listeners. Great fight here. I mean, how much respect you got to have for Rob Font to step up and in short notice to take on a monster like Sandhagen. I regard him as maybe Font's the gatekeeper. I think calling Sandhagen a gatekeeper is unfair. And I'm not trying to debate with you. But I look at him well higher than that. I mean, he's beaten Vera. He's beaten Aldo. And he's beaten Yadong. Meanwhile, it's Font that has lost a couple and then came in, fought the young Yanez and painted his fence look great. So as much respect as I give for Rob Font to step in on such short notice, that's the same respect I gave to Sandhagen to accept the Nurmagomedov fight that got canceled. That's why we're seeing Font. No one wants Nurmagomedov. Sandhagen went right after him. I think in this fight, you got a boxer who's 6-7 years older. He looked great in his last fight. I can see why people would like him. He has a way to win, and that's to keep it standing and try and touch Sandhagen. I think that's what's going to be the difficult thing to do. I think it's Sandhagen's training at elevation. He has cardio for days. He's long, he's lanky, he's going to be taller and longer, and his legs, his movement is really what makes him. His defense is Matrix-like in the way he moves, and I believe he's the more well-rounded fighter. So I believe Sandhagen's the rightful favorite here. I'm tracking him opening at 265, gone right to 315 or so. That's aggressive, makes it tough to bet him, which is why some weeks ago we played a game and parlayed into him to this week. So I have no pressure on this fight. If I'm looking at it clean, I'm probably looking at some kind of a Sandhagen decision, maybe inside the distance, because he knows he really needs to continue to try and finish people so he can project himself into the top two of the division.
Yeah, again, and he's been there, right? Lost to Aljo, got caught there kind of in a headlock. We saw that in that finish a couple of years ago here. And I have a lot of respect, certainly, for Cory Sandhagen and Rob Font, as you mentioned, for these guys now taking this fight at 140. Does the weight matter to you at all, Lou, that it's not at 35 and it is up at 40?
No, because I don't think you have a fight otherwise. I mean, we got to be fair to
Font. Yeah, you can't make it.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. And for this reason, I don't mind a 140. I think really for two athletes this fine-tuned, it's probably better for both.
Yeah, I totally tend to agree there. You know, you look at the co-main event here in Jessica Andrade, former champion, against Tatiana Suarez, and it feels like another fight here that we look at it and we go, wow, even a bigger favorite here with Suarez at over a $4 betting favorite against somebody Andrade, very well respected, obviously a former title holder here But now you look at Suarez, she feels like she might be next, certainly in this division, and it feels like that's being priced into this year. Is there another way to attack it? Because I know we don't like to lay such big price tags.
Dave, this is the big bully fight where you see him coming, you turn around, you just run for the hills. In this fight, you have a gal in Suarez that's a dynamic wrestler and talent, but coming off neck injury that's caused her not to be active as she'd like to be. On the other side, speaking of activity, Andrade has had 4 fights in 23 already with little to show for it, actually poor performances. And so I have to really question that much activity coming into a fight like this, yet there's unknown with such a big, heavy favorite. This has passed screaming all over it for me just because of the unknown on each side.
Yeah, I am passing at this price tag as well. Totally picking up what you're putting down there. There is a fight that I know you haven't passed on. As a matter of fact, you've already released, and it's Jeremiah Wells against Carlston Harris. And I want to make sure of the numbers here. Harris now, maybe it's because you're released, Lou, but it's down to plus $1.10. I know you got a better price tag on him. What do you like so much about this fight?
Well, guys, actually, I waited. I was going to throw it out. I thought I'd still have the plus 135 today, and we look, and I see 115 was a half hour ago. It's 110. So let's not wait on this one. Carlton Harris, longer, taller, maybe not as ferocious. People don't know him as well. Wells had a really explosive last outing, but I think this is the favorite's on the wrong side, and it's starting to get corrected. Harris is longer, taller, more violent, and the better striker. I like him a lot in this spot against Wells.
Let's get to a couple other fights here on the early part of this card that I know you've already got some solid leans to. One is Jake Hadley against Cody Durden. We saw Durden out last time. He's going to try to wrestle, and sometimes that's been very profitable as a dog. He's a dog again in this spot against Hadley. Do you like Cody to go back-to-back?
Yeah, Cody opened, I want to say, excuse me for having to use the cheaters here, but Cody Durden opened plus 140, is now plus 165. So I'm not in a hurry to jump Durden as a dog yet. Rather, I want to tip everyone off. Let's watch this number through the week. If it continues to climb, terrific. If not, and goes the other way, then jump. But let's try and get it at its apex. Why do I like Durden? Durden started off with a couple clunkers in his UFC career, but his last 3 fights have shown tremendous improvement and determination, most especially his last fight, which I gained a tremendous amount of respect for the kid, I think, even though he lost. So I like Durden in this fight against the ship-in from England, has to travel, had trouble missing weight last time. We'll have to watch that. But I think Durden, with the wrestling base and the gas, is the way to go here. And I want to see that number continue to climb, Dave.
All right, so keep an eye on that as it's ballooned up to plus $1.64 on the Durden side. Maybe even get a better number here on the wrestler. I love where your head's at with that one. I want to pick your brain about Tanner Boser. It's a former heavyweight now, come down and weight a little bit here against Alexa Kammer. Right now, Kammer is the dog at plus $1.36. Tanner Boser at minus $1.62. What do you make of guys that come back trying to find their weight, if you will, and now down to 205 after fighting at heavyweight?
Yeah, great question, Dave. Boser swore he'd never go down from heavyweight. And now this is his second fight. He went into a fight against a guy in Kutalaba that's very beatable, and he got caught and knocked out. Okay, well, let's see if on his sophomore trip he can do a little bit better. They give him a guy that's been highly inactive, primarily a stand-up striker, at least from what I saw 2 years ago when he last fought. And this number's unusually low. Boser opens minus 180. It's now minus 162. A lot of raised eyebrows on this fight. I don't know what to think of Kammer, except from what I know of him, and that he's durable, tough, strong, not necessarily fast or quick. And this should be Boser's fight to win. We'll see.
And it should be obviously will be the bigger man inside that octagon. Also on this card, Dustin Jacoby is back in there. Kennedy and Chekwu. This feels like a very compelling matchup here. Right now, Kennedy is minus $1.55. Dustin plus $1.30. Any thoughts on this one here on a Tuesday?
I think my thoughts are that we're going to see a stand-up fight, and that this is way more evenly matched than the line is indicating right now. I like the Hanyak from Canada a little bit in this fight. Let's see how things go throughout the rest of the week. Shirley Kennedy is a big, strong, imposing figure coming in with some momentum. But again, pretty cheap line here. Oh, by the way, Jacoby opened -120, so let's respect our bookmakers.
Yeah, they are moving that number here. Got about 90 seconds to go here. Any other fight that you see in this card, Lou, that you might be able to identify some value here on a Tuesday before we get deeper into the week when you know these numbers are going to change?
Kyler Phillips is coming in from the MMA lab. He's coming in off a suspension for a substance that he was unaware of that he was taking. In any case, he's served his time. They're giving him Ronnie Barcelos, who's hugely uneven. However, Barcelos can strike and fight. This is going to be a firefight. Phillips opened 210. He dipped down to 175. And of course, now he's bouncing back up a little bit. But I think this is a decision fight for Phillips all day long.
30 seconds to go. Tell the people what they get when they check out the Bout Business podcast every Friday.
Creative ways to make profit on UFC events in a 16-minute podcast. Dave, crew, thanks for everything you do for us. Good luck to everybody.
You're the best, Lou. Appreciate you. Give him a follow on Twitter @Gamblou. Check out the Bout Business podcast. We're going to Chicago next, catching up with Jordan Sherwood. Get his thoughts on this big card. Come on back. It is First Strike here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. We continue First Strike here on VSiN. Dave Ross at Circus Sportsbook in fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada. We go back out to the great city of Chicago to catch up with Jordan Sherwood. And I said, it's Nevada, not Nevada. You can't do that. Like, you can't mess up the Windy City. It's Chicago, right?
It's Chicago.
It's just Chicago.
And it's deep dish. Let's set the record straight. It's Chicago and it's deep dish.
It's overrated.
And it's Lollapalooza weekend as well.
Oh, really? Lolla's back? Oh, man. I've been there for one of those.
They're all going to come out the next couple of days.
The kids will be out. That is for sure. Yeah. Jordan, great to have you back on, my man. Let's talk about your unnamed MMA podcast for the people out there in Chicago and beyond, and tell the people where they can access it.
Yeah, you could find it on the ESPN Chicago app, or really where any of the podcasts are available on Spotify and whatnot. Me and Adam Abdallah, we break down every single fight card. So last week I was talking about all my plays that did not hit, Dustin Poirier and Jan Blachowicz and whatnot. But this week, again, we preview the upcoming fight card and give a couple of our selections for UFC Fight Night in Tennessee.
For the record, I thought you were on the right side of Blachowicz, but look, the judges split decision. Sometimes judges see it the other way, but it was close fight, very close fight with Alex Pereira. But look, back on the horse we go this week. Let's get to some plays that I know that you like, and I was talking about this with Lou Finicaro in the last segment about Tanner Boser, a guy coming down from heavyweight. Now he's back to light heavyweight against Alexa Kammer. What's your angle on this fight here, and how do you judge fighters that are, I don't want to say constantly, but maybe looking for the right home with their weight?
Yeah, I think in a guy in particular case in Tanner Boser, like we always knew that he was a smaller heavyweight, that he wasn't obviously having to cut down to 265, 266, and he always relied on his speed and his movement. Finally, he makes the smart decision to go down to light heavyweight. His last fight didn't work out too well. Ian Kudilaba kind of smoked him, but I think it was a tough welcoming party. Anybody that's going in against the Hulk is probably in for a rude awakening. So I think Tanner Boser has always relied on his foot movement, has always relied on his speed, and is a guy that's probably going to be careful because look at his record. He's lost 4 of his last 5 fights. He loses another one, he could be on his way out of the UFC, particularly because it'll be 2 losses at light heavyweight. And Alexa Kammer, a guy just is not impressed. Came with a lot of hype, a lot of notoriety, I believe, training with Stipe Miocic and in Cleveland, and has lost 2 fights in a row after winning his his UFC debut. So I think both guys going to be tentative. Both guys really not finishers in my mind. So I think the angle is at the over at 2.5, that this is a fight likely to see the judges' scorecards. I think Tanner Boser is going to win the fight. He's just going to outpoint Kammer. But I think both guys could be on the chopping block, going to be a little bit tentative as opposed to, looking to go get in there and get a quick finish.
Yeah, interesting. And again, so maybe look to that Bozer by decision prop as well if you don't want to lay the $1.62, but certainly play that over 2.5, if not the fight to go the distance to shorten up those price tags. Let's talk about another wrestler that's in there. And I know Cody Durden, very successful last time out in an underdog role. He's an underdog again against Jake Hadley. What do you make of Cody now trying to get that wrestling going here and maybe surprising people at plus prices?
Yeah, I think he knows what works for him. I mean, look, this is a guy that I think has been underestimated, not just in his last fight against Charles Johnson, but, several fights in a row, just because, he ran in Makayev, and, well, who runs into Makayev and is going to look good? I mean, that guy's just steamrolling everybody. So, Cody Durden, a guy taking a fight against Hadley on short notice. So, that's an extremely difficult matchup. Durden's going to be in shape, so there isn't any concern of mine that the cardio is going to come into play because he's taking the fight on short notice. The guy is always in the gym and always prepared for a fight. And what we've seen from Hadley, even though he's had success of late in the UFC, he struggled with grapplers. Guys are going to push the pace and look to take him to the ground. And I'm not worried about the stand-up. I don't think Hadley possesses any skills that Cody Durden hasn't seen before. So, on short notice at a plus dog price, I like Cody Durden to continue this win streak that he's on and make it 4 wins in a row over a guy in Jake Hadley.
Yeah, and nice juicy number right now, plus $1.64, and that number's been going up. So we'll see where that number goes before we get to Saturday. I'm very intrigued by this fight because I've had it circled to Diego Lopez against Gavin Tucker. Lopez right now, minus $1.70. That number has gone up. And now it's coming back down a little bit to minus $1.62. What do you make of Diego in this spot as the guy that's 9 years the junior of Gavin Tucker?
Yeah, 9 years the junior, but just looked uber impressive, taking a fight on short notice against, one of the best fighters in his division in Mavzar Uvilov, and really threatening with a lot of submissions. Uvilov had to pull out at like a late third round to get the win. So I think now having a full camp for Lopez, it's going to be impressive. And a guy in Gavin Tucker, who look, he had some issues outside the cage. He had some injuries, had that flash knockout loss to Dan Ige. Just really hasn't lived up to the hype that he came in with, coming out of, regionally out of Canada. And I think Diego Lopez is a legit fighter, a legit guy that's going to be in the UFC for quite some time. So if he is, first off, he's living up to that price at $1.70. It started at $1.34, came down, now it's back up. I think he just gets the fight anywhere he wants and overwhelms Gavin Tucker. And even though Tucker's not been a guy that I believe has ever been submitted, I think we could see the first one of his mixed martial arts career. So I like Diego Lopez not only to win, but win inside the distance.
I think that's a really smart play there because I do think we're going to be talking more about this youngster. Anybody under 30 is still very young to me. Speaking of impressive youngsters, certainly in the UFC, Kennedy in Zekachu, in Chukwu, they've been switching around the pronunciation of Kennedy, but he has really been a kid on the rise here. Dustin Jacoby, though, is one of those guys, too, that I think we've looked at and said, we thought maybe earlier in his UFC career he'd be ascending to different heights. He's now 35. Kennedy's 31. What do you make of this matchup? It feels like a pivotal matchup here in the light heavyweight division for these two guys.
Yeah, I think you're right for both guys, and I'm very intrigued by it. I mean, Dustin Jacoby has cashed a lot of times an underdog, a guy that's unheralded, was in the UFC, washed out, righted the ship in glory, and now utilizes his kickboxing skills to be a mainstay in the UFC light heavyweight division, with Big Kennedy. Let's just call him Big Kennedy. How about that?
Big Kennedy.
Big K. Look, 3 fights in a row now that he's won. He's looked impressive in finishes and all. Ian Kudelaba, he smoked Devin Clark the last time out. And now, look, I think he's prepared for a stand-up fight with Dustin Jacoby. Dustin Jacoby obviously has a tremendous skill set from that discipline. But I think Kennedy, now has come into his zone. He's comfortable. He's not tentative like he was in the 2 losses prior to this 3-fight win streak. I love the camp that he comes out at. So I think Kennedy just continues this meteoric rise that he's on now. Dustin Jacoby's a tough out.
Yep.
It probably goes to the judges' scorecards because Dustin Jacoby's a very difficult guy to finish. But I think Kennedy is legit. You're going to prove why he deserves to be in the top 15, maybe even the top 10 of the light heavyweight division.
For the fight to hit the cards, minus $1.20. And again, Kennedy is one of the more impressive guys we've seen in the UFC, certainly post-fight, and the admiration he has for the sport and being over here in the UFC. Easy guy to root for, and I get choked up just thinking about it. Let's talk a little bit about the main event here. in Cory Sandhagen against Rob Font. And we don't want to necessarily be in the business. Certainly, I think we've talked about this over the last couple of years on First Strike, of laying $3 favorites. You get an upset, and all of a sudden your bankroll could be shot for that day. But we have a catchweight here in the main event against Rob Font, potentially 5 rounds. How do you handicap guys now fighting out of weight, short notice replacement here with Rob Font stepping in? And, you want to say there's nothing to lose for Font because certainly you want to win to get yourself back in title contention. But it does feel like not a lot to gain for Sandhagen and potentially a lot to lose. How do you see this fight?
Yeah, that's it. Exactly the storyline. I mean, look, Cory Sandhagen has, unfortunately for him, now become the gatekeeper for the championship. Like, you beat him, then you should be fighting for the championship. And Cory Sandhagen goes, look, he's had his shot. He lost to Aljamain Sterling in a pivotal fight a couple years ago, and he obviously had the controversial loss to Peter Yan, and I believe also TJ Dillashaw was on there as well, that fight. So look, I mean, he was supposed to be Dominic Cruz 2.0, great footwork, in and out movement, volume striker, can back it up with some wrestling, and got some, unique length for the division as well. So you're right, taking on a guy, albeit at short notice, but Rob Font, that's, lower down on the totem pole in the rankings, it's not significant for him. So I think he's got to go out there and he's got to do something that's really never been done, and that's go out there and finish Rob Font. Marlon Vera got close.
Yep.
He dropped him 3 times in that fight that eventually Font lost. But Sandhagen's got to be prepared for one of the best boxers we've got in the division. Rob Font not only thumps, but he's got great boxing. We saw it come to light the last time out against Adrian Yanez. Impressive finish for Rob Font. And I don't really care about the short notice nature of the fight either, Dave. I mean, look, Rob Font's a guy that's gone 5 hard rounds with Marlon Vera, 5 hard rounds with Jose Aldo, 5 rounds with Cody Garbrandt. So he's used to going into the championship round. So, yeah, Sandhagen's got to be extremely concerned. I probably would either couple Sandhagen into a parlay with maybe Big Kennedy and Tatiana Suarez, who's on the co-main event, and try and get it at plus money, or maybe you take a flyer on the dog in Rob Font, just because, again, I think he's prepared. He's like we talked about Cody Durden. He's not just sitting on the couch waiting for a call. That guy's in the gym all the time preparing for a fight.
By the way, Mom's very happy that you're not driving this week and you're safe in studio. She was worried about you a week ago. Jordan, great stuff as always. Give him a follow to Wood on ESPN 1000. When we come back, we're going to catch up with Nick Kalikas here in Las Vegas. Come on back. It's First Strike here on VSiN. DraftKings Sportsbook is giving you plenty of ways to bet the UFC. Just download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. You're going to be able to bet on more than just the main event. DraftKings has great odds on fight lines, total rounds, and features for all MMA events. Eligibility restrictions do apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for all the terms and conditions. It is time now to catch up with our guy, Nick Kalikas. You can follow him on Twitter as I do, @FightOdds. And, Nick, I want to start off with something, because when you look at the co-main event and the main event, we see big, hefty price tags out there. As a guy that sets numbers, what is the objective right away? Is it to look for two-way action to say, all right, we're putting that big number out there. We're hoping we get enough dog plays to offset the big guys that might come in on the big, heavy favorite?
Yeah, that's a basic concept for sure. There's no question about it. You don't want to get buried on either side of a fight, especially, the variables, anything can happen, as we know. We see it all the time. I mentioned decisions and how bad they can be for sure. So you want to make sure you cover your end and not get buried in just one-sided action. So you do set a number that you want to attract some dog action. You want to attract obviously some favorite action. And if you take an opinion or a side, then obviously, you're setting it a certain way. So you do get nibbles on that price early on, and then you can kind of adjust as the market goes.
So when you see a fight like this with Cory Sandhagen against Rob Font, and you've got catchweights, you've got short notice with Rob Font coming in, we're going to fight this one now at 140 as that catchweight. How do you set those numbers early? Because it doesn't feel like you're traditional. We got long camps. We can kind of go through the traditional way of setting the number. Do you have to adjust it because of the conditions of the fight?
Yeah, absolutely. You have to take all that stuff in consideration for sure. And if a fighter's coming in on short notice, a lot of times it'll impact the number a lot more so. In this case, though, it did make an impact for sure, but not as drastic. I mean, Rob Font is a true professional. He's in a situation where he's always pretty much ready. I mean, he's just at such a high level. He's a title contender. He's kind of in the mix, so he's staying ready. So it's not going to be as much of an impact here in this scenario. It's just honestly, I mean, he's fighting a very difficult matchup for him. And Sandhagen, I mean, Sandhagen's at the top of the division for a reason. And still, even though Font just got some of that respect back against Yanez, I still think people question his overall durability and his ability to kind of get the W in a spot like this.
And again, you mentioned it against in the Yanez fest the last time out. Cash is a big dog. And I think it's because of the age now, right? In the wars we've seen Rob Font in at 36. Cory Sandhagen, 31, obviously lost to the Funk Master. He's had some close decisions that haven't gone his way. I think most notably TJ Dillashaw. You can make debates as to whether or not he won some of those fights. What do you make of what this would mean for Sandhagen now? Does he have to go out as a $3 betting favorite here, $3.15, and put on a show, not just win, to get himself right back in? Because I think we still look at him as a guy in the rotation as a potential title contender at 135.
I don't think he needs to do too much. Like, he doesn't have to go out here and finish Font, to get that respect. Font's a very good fighter. So I think just, even a competitive win over Font, which is what I'm expecting overall, that would go a long way for him too. Because again, Font typically underrated. I mean, you just said it. He cashed as a decent dog last time. Not a lot of people are giving him enough credit in that spot either. So it's just one of those guys, again, he's done such a good job throughout his career, but there's moments in a 5-round fight especially where he kind of wears it so much that it's hard to trust him. And I think that's the situation here too. It's a 5-round fight. If it goes to round 3, 4, 5, even though he's going to be effective in his own right offensively, he just starts to wear it a little bit and he just starts to get kind of picked apart, and that all adds up. So I think we could see that same scenario playing out here with Sandhagen. That's why you're seeing the line so high.
Okay, so you mentioned you get possibly in those championship rounds of 4 and 5 where maybe Font could fade a little bit here. The over right now, it is juiced at 4.5 rounds to minus $1.25. If you like the fight just to go to and hit the cards without picking a winner, it's minus $1.05. How do you think this might get played out in the betting market as now we're starting to see that total round prop hit the boards?
Well, first, the action did come in on the over in the market because, again, you got two durable guys overall. And I'm not saying Font slows down to the point where his conditioning is that good. His conditioning is excellent. It just seems like as the fight progresses a little bit, he just starts taking more damage. And it just starts reflecting, and you can see it, and the fight kind of changes pace. So that's why, as the fight progresses a little bit, I think we could see that happen again. But as far as durability and cardio and conditioning goes, a lot of people were coming in and betting the over, but now you're starting to see it come back down a little bit. You're starting to see sharp action come back and buy the under because, again, 5 rounds, a long time to go. And round 4 and round 5, I think, is where it's going to be kind of interesting as we get in those rounds.
Yeah, certainly the toughness of both these guys is not in question here. So we'll see if this one does make it to the championship rounds or we get some finishing potential in this one. Speaking of big numbers, when you're setting those, certainly in the co-main event, we're seeing that as well with Tatiana Suarez against Jessica Andrade, of course, a former champion in Andrade here. Suarez feels like once she can stay healthy and not miss time, maybe the next in the strawweight division. Is that why we're seeing such a drastic favorite here in Suarez at minus $4.25? Because you just don't see Andrade as a $3 betting underdog at 115 or 125.
Well said, you don't. I mean, she is just such a good fighter. I mean, to see her being in this position is kind of a head scratcher in most cases, but that tells you the talent and the expectations on the Suarez side. She's so good. She's the best wrestler, obviously, in the division. And if any problems to Andrade in the past, it's been the ground game. It's been the ground fighting. It's been her ability to kind of fend off submission attempts by dominant grapplers. And that's exactly what you're getting here. So the market opened high. It was around minus 700-ish. It got bet down quite a bit because, again, if you're seeing a huge plus number in front of Andrade's name, of course you're going to take a stab at it. She's got that finishing ability. She's got a good ground game in her own right, offensively especially. I mean, she's able to out-wrestle most of her opponents, and then even her submissions you can't count out. But here it's just a different level on the ground, and Suarez should have that advantage. And then what we've seen even as of late, that's been a problem for Andrade. So a lot of people are not expecting Andrade to come out here and get the W. They're expecting her to get put on her back and kind of submitted or get TKO stopped on the ground. And I think that probably is how it plays out. But laying 300-400 is kind of a tough spot against a fighter like Andrade for sure.
And to that point, would you see a lot of people coming in on the submission prop here for Suarez at plus $1.15? Yes, she could get a ground and pound finish if she gets Andrade in a compromising position, but you could almost see the scenario where maybe if Andrade is fish out of water on her back, she turtles up, gives up her back, and that's where the sub could come. Is that why you think that plus $1.15 is the playable side if you don't want to lay the big price tag with Suarez?
Yeah, I think so. You definitely target that because that's, again, I think that's her path to victory on the ground, maybe even inside the distance. But if you're targeting specific, it would be sub over anything else for sure. And that's why you're seeing the price so low. I mean, the narrative's out there. And unfortunately, sometimes we do get to see the narrative play out. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. But this is definitely a case where it's a narrative.
Tell the people about the gambler's perspective here, how they access it. And Nick, maybe some fights that you already see here on a Tuesday that you might be able to talk about on the gambler's perspective coming up this week.
Absolutely. It usually airs on Wednesday on UFC Fight Pass Wednesday evenings. And check out myself, Yanni, the Greek as well. And again, we do cover our best bets, all the steam moves as we kind of touch on a little bit here, and then all the props, anything else that kind of gets into play or some last minute injury news. We have Lynch bits on there. James Lynch does a great job. He interviews a lot of the fighters. So you get kind of nugs from him in that segment as well. It's just a total package. It's a great show. You got to check it out. Thank you for letting me plug it.
Absolutely. Big fan of James as well. Follow his work too. Had him on the show a couple times here. You're right. Sometimes you can glean a little bit into the fighter's perspective here before you make some of these wagers. One fighter that I'm fascinated by is, Big Kennedy, if we want to call him Kennedy and Chikwu here against Dustin Jacoby. We know that Jacoby can be a tough out. Kennedy feels like, though, he is starting to realize a lot of that potential that he has as a really big guy here at 6'5", 205 in the light heavyweight division. What do you make this? It's not a number that's gotten out of hand here, but we know that Dustin is one of those tougher veterans here at 35 years young.
Yeah, and he really should have a striking advantage. Like you said, Kennedy is just a freak as far as size goes, athletic for sure, and he's dangerous. He's getting better, confidence, everything across the board. So he's not an easy out. But I still think you got to look at Jacoby and give him the striking advantage in this spot. I think he's a little bit more technical. He can flow a little better as well, and their takedown defense should neutralize each other out. So you are seeing a lot more sharp action bite early on Dustin Jacoby here, and I think we'll continue to see that as well because Jacoby, again, matches up pretty well here. Even though Kennedy's on the rise, this could be a very difficult spot for him. So for me personally, it's hard to kind of lay the juice on Kennedy. But that being said, as of late, the last couple of days, we have seen some bites on Kennedy too. So it's a spot where initial sharp action is coming on Jacoby. We've seen a little buyback and some sharps disagreeing on that side, betting Kennedy, but the line is coming back down again at Jacoby. So it's going to kind of toggle back and forth. And I still think you're going to see the majority of the sharper action come in on Jacoby.
Yeah, that one feels like outside of the two big, the main event and the co-main, which are big favorites, that could be the most competitive fight that we have here in the main card. Very quickly, got about 90 seconds. Billy Q is back in the octagon against Damon Jackson. When you look at Quarantillo here, minus $1.75, what do you make of Billy Q back in there, try to get back in the winner's circle?
This has been another conflicting fight for the sharps. I mean, we saw some sharp action hit the market with obviously the dog side. I mean, you have to respect a fighter that you're getting with the submission ability that you have in this case, right? So I think it's been back and forth a little bit too, because you're seeing Damon Jackson get that kind of respect from the sharps, but at the same time, he's kind of vulnerable, and you're seeing some sharps kind of bite on the Billy Q side because he has the ability to finish that fight too. So I think we're seeing two-way action here, and now it's getting more towards Billy Q. So the sharper action as of late is coming in on Billy Q.
30 seconds to go, Nick. We call this dealer's choice. Give me a fight you like that you see on a Tuesday that you think you got some value. Maybe that value changes before we get to Saturday.
Looking through it right here. Let me see here.
Yeah.
Scanning through. Another one that's gotten a lot of kind of recognition is Kyler Phillips versus Barcelos. Ooh. Now, that one's kind of been bet up to Kyler Phillips, a very popular fighting. So the sharps came in there. Now we're getting some buyback there. So for me, I like the Kyler Phillips side, but it's all about pricing. If you get under 200, I think you bet Kyler Phillips. If you get over 200, you kind of leave it alone.
Nick, always appreciate your thoughts, my friend. We'll catch up again next week. Going to D.C. with Reed Kuhn next here on First Strike. Start your morning with VSiN Daily Morning Bets. Josh Applebaum gives you every piece of info you need to be ready for betting the day's biggest games in just 15 minutes. He discusses line movement, injuries, and what you need to be looking at before you make those wagers. So make the VSiN Daily Morning Bets podcast part of your morning routine. Download and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. And shout out to Josh Applebaum, who's right now on his honeymoon. And still yet the man is always doing work. So does our guy, Reed Kuhn. You can follow Reed as I do at Fightnomics. He is the author of the book, Fightnomics. You can catch him on ESPN Plus as an MMA contributor, and his numbers are industry respected. Reed, great to have you back on the program this week, my friend. I did want to get to one fight in particular here that I see that maybe on a Tuesday, you're going to wait and see how some of these numbers play out, and then you put them into your system here to see if they're favorable matchups with what the data is telling you. I know you have a lot of data on Billy Q, and Billy Quarantillo is back in there against Damon Jackson. How do you chart what you're going to see this week when you look at the data endpoints that you have to figure out whether or not it'll be a play for you or not?
Yeah, first of all, there's been a lot of price movement since when I first looked at these fights last week. Several heavy steams on some favorites that I liked, and now I'm wondering if I am going to be still playing that come Friday. But this one in particular has been a little bit more even. Damon Jackson is a slight underdog to Billy Q. I've liked Billy Q in the past. I've backed him. I think even as a dog, I've backed him. Mm-hmm. And Damon Jackson is kind of a one-dimensional fighter. The problem is that Jackson is really good at that one dimension. He is the human leech. That's his nickname. And he will backpack you to great effect. And so when you look at a stylistic matchup, you have someone with a really superlative single strength, and it's backpacking people, getting on the ground, tying them up, and getting that choke eventually. So I've got to immediately look at the takedown defense of Quarantillo, and it is about average, I would say. His ground control is also average. So if you're dealing with a really good wrestler and choke artist and someone with average takedown defense, you do have to open the door to a possible upset. And so I am going to I'm going to keep an eye on this fight in particular, look at where the price goes, because otherwise Quarantillo absolutely has the ground, the striking advantage. He's going to be the better striker. It's the ground that I'm more worried about. So if I'm looking for value, I'm looking for grapplers. And that's why I'm leading to maybe an underdog play on this one.
And by the way, the total rounds prop right now is juiced to the under of 2.5 at -1.40, which leads to your play here of Damon Jackson. Maybe possibly you mentioned he gets it down to the ground. Maybe by sub, would you take a stab at that at 5-1?
If I do find myself backing him, that is probably the angle I'm going to go with. But to your point, it's just the under, because whenever you have a stylistic mismatch, if he's not getting it to the ground, he's going to get pieced up on the feet. Billy Quarantillo is pretty good. He's very, very accurate. So he's going to be throwing hands. And if Jackson can't get it down, he's going to get beaten up on the feet.
Very, very good observation. Billy Q, by the way, plus $1.75 if he gets it done by the hands. Conversely, if you like Damon Jackson on the ground, 5-1 via submission. So some juicy plus prices there. Let's get to some fights I know that the data is showing you early on here that maybe it leads itself to go with some of these bigger favorites. And one of those would be Kyler Phillips. And I look at him against Raoni Barcelos here. Barcelos to come back right now, plus $1.64. Phillips, minus $1.98. What has the data shown, and why does it lead you to maybe the $2 betting favorite?
Yeah, at first you look at the stats and you think, all right, these guys are pretty evenly matched when it comes to the stand-up striking. They're both good. They're both accurate. They both have very similar defense, but Kyler Phillips is going to be much, much bigger on fight night. He is also much younger than his opponent. Combine those two things together, and that's usually a good sign if you want to back the favorite. And then you've got the ground game. Barcelos has been very good in terms of ground control and takedown defense. I think he's only been taken down once ever out of 16 attempts from opponents. But Kyler Phillips has actually done more with that. He's been more offensive. He's been more successful getting you down. And so that one is going to be kind of a mismatch on the ground. I don't really know which way it's going to go, because if you're not using wrestling offensively, you're really good at defensive, it might turn into a stalemate. But on the feet, I think round over round, you got to go with Phillips as being slightly more crisp, a little bit more durable, and definitely more rangy.
Yeah, you mentioned that range, 5-inch reach advantage for Kyler Phillips. So very astute observations there by the numbers. The co-main event and the main event. Normally we don't like to lay such big favorites, right? But sometimes what your numbers will show you, Reed, is it's priced accordingly, or maybe not even as big a favorite as you might see on paper. I wonder if that's the case in the co-main event here with Tatiana Suarez. Again, we all know in MMA circles what we think she could eventually be in the strawweight division, and I think that could lead you to a championship bout. But Jessica Andrade is such a popular former champion and so well-respected. Are the numbers just dictating that Suarez should be a 425 betting favorite?
Yeah, and because there is a massive size difference here, they're going to look at on fight night. Suarez is huge compared to Jessica Andrade. And I've backed Andrade most fights she's ever fought in. I think she's a dual threat fighter. She fights on both levels. She's got crafty moves. She has the highlight reel finishes, and she gets it done. She's very tough. But Suarez is a different animal. And when I look at the numbers, it's the ground stats that really stick out. I mean, she has a clean sweep. Suarez is a very aggressive offensive wrestler. She takes the fight down and she dominates people there on the ground. And the fact that she is going to be so much larger than Andrade, who is really more suited to strawweight, and Suarez has dabbled at flyweight, I think that's what we're going to see. We're going to see a bigger fighter who's used to just ground and pounding people and tying them up. And I think that's what she's going to do. Now, the weight cut does concern me, changing weight classes for Suarez. That's a bit of a wild card, but purely by the numbers, she is a deserving heavy favorite.
Yeah, again, both fighters here fought in different weight classes and now back down. So it's very interesting. And you're right. I think when people see the size disadvantage for Andrade, maybe they can understand why the number is where it is. In a potential 3-round fight, do you see finishing for potential here for Suarez to get it down to the ground and do what she does? And maybe then you could look to get a plus money here at a sub price of plus $1.15 instead of laying the big price tag at over $4?
Yeah, Andrade has been finished by submission before, not often. She doesn't lose very often, but that's one angle that I would look for. If you're going to spend that much time on the ground with a much bigger opponent, I do think Suarez will find the back at some point, maybe even in each round, she might find her way to the back. So you're going to have opportunities there. Now, Andrade is not an easy out. She's fairly skilled veteran, but she has been submitted. So if there is a finishing prop, it's going to come on the ground from Suarez, I believe. It's tough because with that size, she could also just stretch her out and beat her up with TKO, ground and pound. So it's hard to pick how that finish is going to go. I might have to explore the prices a bit.
Yeah, 4-1 right now for KO, TKO, or DQ. Right now, plus $1.15 via sub. And to your point, Reed, your numbers never lie. The fight to go the distance right now without picking a winner, plus $1.95. So a lot of finishing potentials. You would think Andrade would have to try to get out of there with strikes, and you would think Suarez somehow on the ground, whether or not it's ground and pound or a submission. What about the co-main event? And I ask you this because I'm always fascinated what your numbers tell you when you get a catchweight, right? But I know you have a lot of data, certainly, on Rob Font and Cory Sandhagen. These are two veterans of the sport, been around the block here, now both north of 30, 36 here for Rob Font. How does that price in? Do the models just say, all right, the numbers are the numbers, even though we're going up 5 pounds here to a catchweight?
Yeah, I think the catchweight has more to do with simply the short notice booking for Rob Font. Maybe he didn't have as much a lead time to cut weight. And that does, if you're a backer of Rob Font, you got to be thinking, wait a minute, does that mean he's not in shape? Did he not have a full camp? You don't want to be jumping into a main event against a contender like Sandhagen if you haven't had a full camp. This is going to be 5 full rounds. So that would be a red flag for me if I was backing Font. The thing is, I don't think I'm going to find myself backing Font. If anything, this could be a slight pass. Maybe you put Sandhagen into some parlays because there are some other heavy favorites here that I do like. But the price went up significantly in the last week. He was more like a 2-1 favorite, now a 3-1 favorite. That's a lot to pay there because when you stack these guys up, they are both very good offensively as strikers. And I was actually surprised that the reach differential wasn't a lot more for Sandhagen. Now, Font's a little bit older, also red flag. Sandhagen has the switch stance. He's able to, mix it up a little bit. But Font actually has the reach advantage. So I did not expect that, being the shorter guy who that there is some wiggle room of accuracy for some of these metrics that the UFC measures. But you walk away from this thinking Sandhagen was going to have a massive reach advantage, and he's not. So then I just looked to the numbers. Both guys are accurate. Both guys are busy. I think the stand-up is going to keep the crowd interested. They're both aggressive. But long haul, this has got to be Sandhagen. I mean, he also has better ground control. He has that outlet. I think that's enough to sway rounds. And if that catch weight, to your point, if that's a red flag that Font might not be fully prepared from a training camp perspective, rounds 4 and round 5 against Font or around Sandhagen, if he's mixing it up and taking you down, that could be too much to ask. So I think I got to lead Sandhagen. I'm going to support him. Maybe he goes into a parlay, but that is kind of a steep price for him.
Yeah, that switch stance, as you mentioned, I know that Frankie Edgar remembers that knee from Cory Sandhagen, that's for sure. Hey, Reed, appreciate your thoughts as always, and want to thank Lou Finicaro, Jordan Sherwood, Nick Kalikas, and, of course, Reed Kuhn. Rob Moreno, Britton Hess doing a great job producing this show each and every week. Enjoy the fights. We'll see you next week here on VSiN.